Okay. I don't know where my theme song went, but that's okay. Hello. I am Willy Bragg. Welcome to another edition of the Willy Bragg Show, Saturday night feature. And today we're going to discuss workers strike back. Ksahama Sawant. I'm now knowing how to not say her name without pronouncing the K in front of there. K is silent. So so let me just try to remember that. So let me go ahead and move this out of the way and we'll get started. So anyway, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to be sure to subscribe to the KRTD YouTube site, to them on Facebook, on Twitch, on Twitter, and to and all other appropriate platforms that they're on. In addition, do the same for the Willy Bragg Show on YouTube, on Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch, and hopefully all will be well, in the name of looking out for independent media at this point. So anyway, I hope every one of you are doing well this evening, and we're going to discuss Ksahama Sawant, and workers strike back. And so let's start with the person that's starting this movement of workers strike back, Ksahama Sawant. Because what's kind of noteworthy about her is that she's now probably the leading socialist in this country at this point, as far as trying to create a movement. For those of us who have lost a lot of faith in Bernie and the squad, we need some kind of encouragement. And I would say that Ksahama Sawant, not being a personality, and I do not mean it that way, but she's trying a new approach that I think that sounds more focused, and I think that's where labor needs to be, is to go and to do something that's more focused. So we're going to focus on workers strike back, and I personally endorse it. And it teaches their own. Let a thousand flowers bloom, as the saying goes. But I personally endorse this movement, workers strike back. Now, as you know, Ksahama Sawant is she belongs to an organization called Socialist Alternative. And we could find the banner for it right there. And there it is. And we'll get started with the explanation behind this movement called Socialist Alternative. And the best way to describe Socialist Alternative would be this. And it's basically, it is, even though I'm not a practicing Trotskyist, it is essentially a Trotskyist political party in the United States, and it is and it's fighting for a revolutionary, democratic, and socialist economy. And its target is capitalism, and they see it as a fundamental problem in society. And Socialist Alternative, highest claim to fame in the past decades been the election of Ksahama Sawant in the year 2013, when she was sworn in 2014 as a city councilwoman. She is not running for re-election, by the way. Well, where do I go with this? The history of the Socialist Alternative. It started out in 1986 as a labor militant by the Committees for Workers International, and basically it was It also played a part in what became known as the Labor Party in the 1990s, which was a group called Labor Party Advocate that became the Labor Party. And that was the flavor of the month in the 1990s for a lot of lefties, including myself. There was a lot of people that had a lot of hope in it. And the party's now pretty much gone, except in the state of South Carolina, where they do have ballot access. If I lived in South Carolina, I would be a registered Labor Party member right at this point. But anyway, and maybe there might be a few little chapters around, but it's really the Labor Party as an organization is no longer in existence. But getting back to Socialist Alternative, as labor militant, I believe at some point they changed their name. I'm not exactly sure when they changed their name. Oh, wait a minute. They changed their name in the late 1990s to Socialist Alternative. And so that's what happened with them. And they were involved with the anti-globalization movement in the early 2000s and a lot of the anti-war movement too, because I remember meeting some of them at the anti-war events during the Bush-Cheney years. And unlike a lot of other Trotskyist organizations I've encountered, they seem to be very, they seem to have a softer approach, even though in spite of what they state their claims are. But they been very adamant against war, against the invasion and occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan. And they have been, as far as electoral action is concerned, they have been behind the candidacy of Ralph Nader for president in 1996, 2000, 2004, and 2008. And in 2012 and 2016, they were behind Jill Stein, and they supported Howie Hawkins in 2020 from the Green Party. And in 2016 and 2020, in the Democratic primaries, even though they're skeptical of the Democratic Party, they did endorse Bernie Sanders. That would be Socialist Alternative. So I'm just giving you basically a quick synopsis of their history, and at this point, so they were the ones that came up with the $15 hour minimum wage movement, because it was considered pie in the sky back when she was introducing it for the city council. I mean, as a city councilwoman, Ksahama Sawant, which I'm going to get to her history in a moment. But it was considered pie in the sky and considered ridiculous for a lot of folks. But eventually, it would become it would be adopted by Bernie Sanders nationally, and now there is a movement for $15 an hour minimum wage nationally. Unfortunately, it's not national law yet, but certain states have raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, including the state of Florida, which has the governor, Ron DeSantis, who is not in favor of the $15 hour minimum wage, nor would be the super majority controlled Republican legislature in Florida. They're not in control. They're not in favor of the minimum wage being raised to $15 an hour. But it was put on the state ballot in 2020, where Donald Trump did well getting reelected. In spite of that, they were able to get $15 an hour established in the state of Florida by the referendum. So there were people who voted Republican and voted for Trump and voted for DeSantis, that still favored the $15 hour minimum wage, which, on a little side note, is why the Democrats, if they're going to try to be relevant, and I'm not going to hold my breath, if they're going to try to be relevant, they need to do things like focus on class warfare and mean it. Class militancy. Don't be afraid of the word. It's not a dirty word, wage class warfare. And so often over the years, I've heard right wingers hurl the term, "Well, the Democrats just waging class warfare," when they weren't waging class warfare. And the Democrats were like, "Well, we're not waging class warfare." A lot of them weren't at that time, and they really weren't. Some of them use the rhetoric now, but once they're in power, forget about it, you know? So, anyway, socialist alternatives supported the Occupy movement. And, you know, and they, as I said, the movement for Bernie, and they have been doing what they can, over the last, well, since 1986, since the early days as labor militant in the United States, not to be confused with the British group, Labor Militant, but they were coincidentally a Trotskyist group trying to take over the Labour Party in the UK back then. Do look up the term Liverpool 47. That is something to look up. Interesting, when the Labour City Council took over the city in the 80s, and Margaret Thatcher basically eliminated the city council. Eliminated the city council government in Liverpool. I'm sidetracking here for a little historical reference. And she put those people on trial, you know, and some of these people did jail time. And several other cities in the UK in the 1980s had their municipality stripped away from them, you know. So anyway, that's my little side note on that, because of the two common names, Labor Militant in the UK and Labor Militant in America. Both are Trotskyist organizations, but they're not necessarily counterparts of each other. But interesting just to say same. So and that's basically a quick synopsis about socialist alternative. As I said, the people I have met from socialist alternative over the years, I have liked. So personally, they seem to be on the level and not fanatical or whatever, compared to some other folks I have run across over the years, in my personal experience. But as I said, but I have been impressed with their work. And I think that I, you know, will certainly take another look at them and be a little more open-minded on what they're more all about and everything. So next point I was going to make will be on Ksahama Sawant. So let me go ahead and let me find Ksahama Sawant real quick, and we'll get started on her, because she is the reason why we are talking about this for the most part this evening, in regard to the movement Workers Strike Back, which ultimately we're going to get into, because what they're doing, as I say, in my opinion, I think that they're very focused on what they're going to do, what they're trying to achieve. And I will encourage each and every one of you to take a second look at this movement. So let me go ahead and do this here, and we'll get started. All right. Okay. So Ksahama Sawant. What can I say about her? Well, we all know about her, you know, about her being a city council woman, and she was born in 1973. She's just a couple of years younger than myself. She's an Indian American politician, economist, who has been serving in the city council since 2014. And as I said, self-explanatory, she's a member of Socialist Alternative. She's a former software engineer and economics instructor in Seattle after she immigrated from India, and she ran unsuccessfully for the Washington House of Representatives before winning her in 2012, before winning her city council seat in 2013. And she's the first socialist to win a citywide election in Seattle since Anne Louise Strong. And see, I'm trying to think what orientation does she belong to as far as socialism is concerned. Okay, apparently she was a wobbly, a member of Industrial Workers of the World. Okay. She became a communist later on in her life. Okay, that's okay. But she was like the first since Anna Louise Strong, and back in 1916. Anyway, Sawant narrowly, so she was probably a member of the Socialist Party of America at that time. Talking about Anna Louise Strong. So anyway, Sawant narrowly. She survived a recall in 2021 elections. He was accused of some kind of fraud or what have you, and they had a recall election, and economic interests, business interests, spent over $1 million trying to unseat her, and she won. She was able to beat the recall, which was absolutely impressive. Absolutely. So anyway, surprisingly, I found out that she graduated with a PhD in economics at North Carolina State University in 2003. I'm like, wow. In 2003, that time, I mean, I was like 30 miles away. It's like, who would have knew? Who knew? So anyway, and she moved to Seattle, of course, after getting her PhD, and then, as I said, the rest being history and all of that. So anyway, well, during her 10 years as city councilwoman, as I said, she was able to achieve the $15 an hour minimum wage for the city of Seattle. She had a $117,000 salary a year, but she decided to live on $40,000 and put the rest of the funds on social justice campaigns. So that was kind of her deal. She made a lot of headwaves in 2014 during the Israeli-Gaza conflict when she condemned both the Israeli government and Hamas at the Gaza Strip for the attacks on each other. But she also denounced the Israeli blockade in Gaza and called for to cut off all military assistance to Israel, as if that's something should be considered controversial. But apparently, just like anybody else making any criticism about Israel, you're going to get criticized in a harsh way. So no matter how small or even reasonable that criticism would be, you're going to get slammed with the bigotry label when there's no bigotry involved. Slaughtering people is slaughtering people, and and that's what it comes down to. So as I said, we're talking about the $15 hour minimum wage, a successful millionaire's tax on wealthy Seattleites. She did try to do an unsuccessful rent control program, and there were other things that she was doing. She was fighting for same-sex marriage. Of course, that became a settled issue later on in 2015 with the Oglefeld decision in the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, it may be in danger with the right-wing direction of the courts and the Republican Party looking for a culture war. But anyway, she's been strongly in favor of marijuana legalization in all 50 states. And she's been in very much in favor of trying to fight against the police brutality. That's a ever increasing problem in this country. So she's got a lot of receipts for the good work that she's done over the years and everything. So as I said, she's going to be stepping down when her term is up. That'll be it. But she's called for the nationalization of Washington state of corporations like Boeing, Microsoft, and Amazon, and expressed her, and made that kind of animate. And so she is the real deal. I mean, even more than Bernie Sanders, who talks a great game, but even though when he talks a great game, he doesn't want to step too much on the toes of his good friend Joe Biden. Yeah. So I should stop doing that. But anyway, so that's pretty much her deal. And so anyway, I look at her and I think of her, historically in the tradition of, basically seeing her kind of in the tradition of Eugene Debs. I would go along with that. I mean, I think that if Eugene Debs was still alive, he would be very proud of the work that she's done. And I consider Eugene Debs as the American standard when it comes to socialism. I mean, he is the granddaddy of them all, historically speaking. So, and even though I am critical these days, I am. During his time, even Bernie during his time, as you can see here in 1989, this C-SPAN interview, if you ever watched it, I mean, he was, and I do think he was sincere back then. He was even calling for an independent political party back then. He wasn't talking about supporting Democrats back then. He was calling for something akin to what they have in Canada, the New Democratic Party. So this is where we're headed right here in this tradition. So when I think about where we're headed, sure. I mean, at one time I could have easily said that Tulsi Gabbard or AOC would be the next in line in that tradition, but they've both let me down. They both have left me down, and I think about Tulsi and AOC a lot, and I just like, why? Why? Just did it have to be that way? So anyway, and now I realistically think that Ksahama Sawant with her new labor organization, and that's she decided to form, and that is basically Workers Strike Back. I think that might be probably the next phase of our movement for socialism at this point, because socialism for me, but we can call it workers' justice for others. I mean, it just depends on how you want to define things. So because we got people they're still nervous about the term and all of that, and that's reality here in America. Suffice to say. So just a real quick side note, we are monetized at KRTD now, at Kerber's News Group, and so we do accept cash. We do accept donations. So we have, I will, if you don't mind, we have over here on our super chat lines. So I just kind of wanted to mention that, and I will mention it, ever so briefly from time to time and all of that. So let's get. I'm sorry, that's my phone right there. So anyway, so we have Workers Strike Back, and basically what they're wanting to do is not necessarily rely on old methods that's really not been working, and it's actually been counterproductive to our labor movement for the last several decades. We need something that's more focused than what's been you know, being emphasized these days, because having a bunch of corrupt local unions relying on a corrupt political party that doesn't even listen to them is problematic. And I'm speaking from personal experience in my previous job, which was union. And I'm grateful for what my job did, the UFCW. I'm grateful for the work they have done. However, the work they have done, they still, and it's not their fault. It is a declining. The unions, they did decline pretty bad in North Carolina, and so they were put in a weakened state. But also, I had my suspicions that they could have done better in many ways, and I'm not going to go too much into detail about that, because that could be considered slander. But I do consider that they could have done a better job than what they have done. But they had an incentive, in my view, not to do so. And I won't go any further than that. So, but I just think that new methods of labor militancy needs to be introduced to the workplace. And it's great that you can go ahead and, do what you can as far as labor organizing and all, but we can't really depend on the two parties when it comes to what to do as far as labor organizing, because look at what happened. I mean, when Obama took over, look what happened to several states. Several states went right to work. We're talking about Pennsylvania. We're talking about West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan. Those states, how in the heck those states were allowed to go right to work, when right to work is creeping up into the north and into the old industrial Rust Belt. How in the world can right to work be creeping up where it was fervent just pretty much in the South and some of the rural Western states? So honestly, what's been being done in the past hasn't been working. So, we got to work outside the electoral system. I would say the same thing about issues like universal health care. And if you look at the civil rights movement, it's not like that the civil rights movement were just hitched along the side of the Democratic Party all along, or in fact, in some areas, the Democrats were, in the South in particular, were hostile to civil rights. But you had to kind of work outside the system of the two parties to pressure politicians to do the right thing. And there's not enough of that. People want to work too much in the system. And that's where I think a lot of complacency has been realized. I mean, look at the squad. They don't do anything. They haven't done anything in terms of healthcare. They haven't done anything as far as living wage. In fact, they voted to break a strike. I mean, and that's in the tradition of Reagan and Thatcher. It's certainly not in the tradition of Roosevelt, and surely not in the tradition of Eugene Debs or Daniel DeLeon or Big Bill Haywood. That's in the tradition of Reagan. That's in the tradition of Thatcher. That's in the tradition of what's his name? The Milton Friedman. People like that. I mean, it's something that Rush Limbaugh would be more proud of. Of course, that dumb person, almost used a bad word, would be claiming that they're still a bunch of socialists anyway. No, if they were socialists, they would have actually done things like force the vote on Nancy Pelosi 2 years ago. They would have done things like force the vote on making Build Back Better what it should be, and even making it more bold than what it was originally presented, or not breaking a strike. if the Congress is going to draft legislation for the rail workers to draft legislation to make sure that these rail workers have sick leave days, have 7 sick leave days, and nothing less, because anything less would have been unacceptable. And it was unacceptable what happened. So anyway, do whatever you can. I'll put down the link. It is workersstrikeback.org. I repeat, it is workersstrikeback.org. And if you go do that, you'll get the link right there. You'll get the information on this movement, and it gives you gives you their petitions and the demands and what they're all about, and the event news broadcasts. Gives you all their information on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. So there you have it. And so let's see what we got here. So let me go ahead and go to this little section here, and we'll go and do this, and we'll go into a little bit of levity, because I always like to add levity to my streams. Because frankly, I'm not all that funny, but if I am funny, it's unintentionally. So I always like to add always a little bit of humor to these streams. This is Turncoat Don, doing his take on Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast, where Ryan Grimjob and Ksahama Sawant's on the guests on the show, and I love it, and I want to share it with y'all, and it's relevant to what we're talking about. So here we go. All right. Okay. Be entertained, folks. Be entertained.
So, but maybe the workers don't want to be part of this fantasy play.
What the actual fuck? We on the left, I'm not talking about people like Ryan. I mean, those of us who genuinely want to defend working people, we have the obligation to call out both elected officials who have betrayed us and also the labor leaders who have betrayed us. I don't know how much Ryan actually knows about the labor movement. I have been a rank and file member of the labor movement. I've been a delegate to the Labor Council. I have spent 10 years as an elected representative. Nobody in their right mind, Ryan, maybe despite being a political analyst, you thought that the Senate, there was any chance of the Senate voting yes on a paid sick leave bill? Yeah, Ryan Grim doesn't worry me. The workers who are listening to this understand that he's engaging in sophistry, and he's completely misrepresenting what I said. The truth, though, is it's not about Ryan Grim. It is about people like him. We cannot trust people like Ryan Grim. Ryan Grim says, never let politicians out of your sight, while at the same time defending those same politicians who have sold out working people. I would say to working people, never let politicians out of your sight, but never let people like Ryan Grim out of your sight. Politicians couldn't sell workers out without the Ryan Grims of the world defending their betrayers. Politicians relied on the left cover of people exactly like Ryan here, making the rounds, making excuses for vicious attacks on the working class. Not only that, but turning around and accusing fighters for workers, socialists like myself, as somehow being against workers. I've seen this all the time in Seattle. If the Democrats on the council weren't given cover by people like them, they would not be able to do what they do, which is sell workers out over and over again.
You got knocked the fuck out, man.
I am so sorry. For some reason that didn't show up here. It's really short. I apologize. I'm going to do that again. So sorry about that.
Maybe the workers don't want to be part of this fantasy play.
What the actual fuck? We on the left, I'm not talking about people like Ryan. I mean, those of us who genuinely want to defend working people, we have the obligation to call out both elected officials who have betrayed us and also the labor leaders who have betrayed us. I don't know how much Ryan actually knows about the labor movement. I have been a rank and file member of the labor movement. I've been a delegate to the Labor Council. I have spent 10 years as an elected representative. Nobody in their right mind, Ryan, maybe despite being a political analyst, you thought that the Senate, there was any chance of the Senate voting yes on a paid sick leave bill? Yeah, Ryan Grimm doesn't worry me. The workers who are listening to this understand that he's engaging in sophistry and he's completely misrepresenting what I said. The truth, though, is it's not about Ryan Grimm, it is about people like him. We cannot trust people like Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm says, never let politicians out of your sight, while at the same time defending those same politicians who have sold out working people. I would say to working people, never let politicians out of your sight, but never let people like Ryan Grimm out of your sight. Politicians couldn't sell workers out without the Ryan Grimms of the world defending their betrayers. Politicians rely on the left cover of people exactly like Ryan here, making the rounds, making excuses for vicious attacks on the working class. Not only that, but turning around and accusing fighters for workers, socialists like myself, as somehow being against workers. I've seen this all the time in Seattle. If the Democrats on the council weren't given cover by people like them, they would not be able to do what they do, which is sell workers out over and over again.
You got knocked the fuck out, man.
Okay. As I said, I am sorry about doing that video and not showing it. I thought I had it so it would be showing, illustrating, but anyway, you got a little bit of a taste of what they were going to say before, and then you got the actual gist of what they were saying. Nobody's advocating doing anything like that. We just, it's parodies, comedy, ha 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 ha. You know, that's the dummy pilot from the movie Airplane. You know, it's just humor. But anyhow, that was from Turncoat Don, and he always provide he and Joe shut the blank lib because we're monetized. I don't want to get in trouble. Would be the ones that would do this kind of humor. So we need more satirists around in the world that kind of take the edge off of such a grim topic. So anyway, suffice to say, let's talk about the worker strike back. What is the gist of what they want? Because I would say that would be very important as far as what they want, because it will keep, keeping focus and keeping some kind of just keeping a relevancy of what we need to get to where we need to. And what I hate about Twitter, or when I show up a Twitter feed on the computer screen, it looks blurry, but when I look back later on, it seems a little bit clearer. So suffice to say, I would just go ahead and read it to y'all anyway. So workers strike back. When we fight, we can win. Number one, workers need a raise. Self-explanatory. $15 hour minimum wage. And honestly, at this point, it needs to probably be $20, $25 an hour at this point. When the $15 hour minimum wage came about a decade ago, it came about at a time when things were a little bit less expensive. And the problem, I hate it when I hear people say, well, if you raise wages, everything's going to go up. Well, everything still goes up anyway. And that's the problem. Things go up, wages have stagnated since the 1980s. And there, that there is something wrong with that picture. And they have actually made sure that the wages stay stagnated. And the whole idea of elevating the standards of workers is considered an abomination to our politicians and because they're bought and paid for by these corporations. So good union jobs for all. Another thing that's self-explanatory. I don't know what details they go into, but I can comment on the thing on unions. So there are things that can be done. Now you look at the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947. I mean, what have Democrats done to reverse Taft-Hartley since 1947? Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. In fact, I mean, they usually when right to work comes into a state, it stays in that state. And what happens when it becomes a national law? Because there are people that are trying to make the Taft-Hartley Act not just a states' right sort of situation. They're trying to make it a national law. And, and it's kind of like when you have 6% of the private sector that's still in a union, and these people know that ordinary workers are getting a raw deal in this country, and so they go and pretend to have a little bit of concern. They'll even tell you, "Oh, we don't mind unions, but not in the public sector." Well, that's the other half of the labor movement. You got roughly 6% in the private sector and about another 5% in the public sector. And, and my parents were public sector union employees. So, I take special exception when I hear get rid of the public sector union jobs, because when that's going to cut out half of the labor movement. And all that's going to do is just going to be easier to destroy the remaining 6%. You might as well not have unions at all if that's what you're going to end up with, and that's not the situation we should ever want to be in this country. So I say, yeah, go ahead, repeal Taft-Hartley if it can be done, but I don't think it can be done at this point. They're not even trying to make it an effort now. Even though we will still have right to work, Obama did find a piece of legislation. He didn't draft it himself, but he campaigned on it in 2008. And I would have rather seen Obama fight for the implementation of the Employee Free Choice Act than to do something about the Affordable Care Act, because it would have had the Employee Free Choice Act. Basically, it would have simplified union organizing and it made it easier to recognize the union in the workplace. And so, at that time before Obama became president, unions were probably about 12% of the workforce at that point, 13%. You might be able to get it up to 25%. I'm making up a number. But and still have a right to work law that coincide, even though I am opposed to right to work. It would be a way to undermine right to work, and I don't have a problem with undermining right to work. So it would have been a good piece of legislation, and it would have carried us forward. And I'm still for the Employee Free Choice Act if somebody can just actually introduce the bill in Congress. I'm sorry, and get it to pass. But I know that's not what they're going to do. So basically, the gist of what I'm saying is we need to do what we can to revive the the organized labor movement in this country, because it is abysmal, is unacceptable. Considering you look at other countries, Western countries, even that where the labor after Margaret Thatcher savaged and destroyed the labor movement in the UK, they're still stronger than it was when the labor movement were at their strongest here in the United States. And that's a sad state of affairs and all that. So that's point number 2. Point number 3, fight racism, sexism, and all oppression. And that's a duh position. That is a duh position, but it needs to be included. I sometimes get accused of being a class reductionist. And although I do have some political differences and issues with all American socialists, he one time discussed class reductionism in a positive way, meaning that it's not a terrible thing per se to be a class reductionist for maybe a brief moment, but there's a time and place to be a class reductionist, and then there's a time and place to toss class reductionism to the side. And I see the logic of what he's saying there. And racism should never be accepted under any circumstances. Racism. There should be no racial segregation, no racial oppression at all. And any attempts needs to be a challenge. Sexism, again, you're a human being. You're equal as far as I'm concerned, and that includes genders. So that includes men, women, everybody should be treated equal. And all other forms of oppressions, all other forms of bigotry that exists, all forms, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, the now people who are anti-trans and all this sort of thing. That needs to be challenged. If people want to be jerks and have their own point of view that's negative and they're not harming anybody, that's one thing. But if they want to be jerks and actually physically oppress people on the basis of who they are, that needs to be challenged. So point number 3, self-explanatory, and there's really nothing to debate there. Number 4, quality, affordable housing, and free healthcare for all. Pretty simple and to the point. And it is what we need in this country. Free healthcare for all. I would say something like a functioning national health service that exists in the UK from how it was incepted in 1948 when it was created, and to fight against all attempts here in the UK, to fight all attempts to put free market little mechanisms in there, because that's just going to make it more expensive, and it's going to make it could introduce to the people of Britain the nightmare that we have here in the United States. And trust me, you would not want that at all. You would not want that at all. I know I don't. So and I was unpleasantly surprised a few days ago, almost a week ago. I had a pleasant interview with somebody who lives in Ireland. She's about to move to England, if she's not moving there already. Is Angie Moon, and Ireland does have universal health care, but it's not the kind of universal health care that we Americans would imagine them happening. And I didn't even realize that myself when I was in Ireland 3 years ago. And basically it's a slightly better Obamacare is what it is in Ireland. They don't have a national health service. or a single payer system like I would have assumed that they would have had at one time. And I knew that in other countries, they had a kind of a mixed system, like in Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and places like that. That Ireland, it fits there too, and unfortunately in that regard. But anyway, healthcare for all is one of my pet issues, and it's something that we need to fight for. And so that's what she's calling for with her program, Workers Strike Back. Housing, we do need housing for all, quality housing for all. And it just makes me mad that I live here in North Carolina, and you know, when I see ordinary homes costing $300,000, and $300K is a lot of money for a house. And so, you know, and I thought 20 years ago, people who were spending $137,000 for the same kind of house down here, I thought, my God, how in the world can they get such a thing paid for? But they were the smart ones to go and bite the bullet and to get it at that time, because, you know, it just keeps going up. And if it keeps going up, by the year 2030, it will cost $1 million to buy a home that costs $137,000 in the year 2000. How in the world can people buy a home with those kind of prices? I mean, that you know, we're talking about ordinary home. We're not talking about something grand, grand. And so, you know, that is something that needs to be addressed. And there's no reason why rent should be as high as it is, and there's no reason why, you know, people should have to sit there and pay $600,000 or $800,000 for a home that shouldn't cost no more than maybe $90,000. I make no apologies for saying that. No more sellouts. We need a new party. Point number 5. I've often said we needed a Labor Party. My friend Catherine Ann McCloskey says, bring back the old Socialist Party of America. Which is, you know, I like the idea of that. So, I mean, I don't care what it's called. I do too care to a degree. I like it called the Labor Party. I would like to see the Labor Party in America. But you can call it whatever you want to call it. The Progressive Party, I'm keen on it. You want to call it, call it whatever you want to call it. Call it what you ever want to call it, but don't call it late for dinner. And I think that Workers Strike Back is committed to the idea of building a Labor Party. They're committed to the idea of it, and that's why I think it's partly the reason why she decided to do something outside of the city council. So, I like the idea of it myself. So let me go ahead and do this here real quick, and we'll get to the next point, and that next point being let's see here. Next point being you know, online presence. Of course, it's a problem, and this is my problem. You know, doing stuff online is great, but you know, people need to do more than being an online keyboard, you know, armchair activist, as the saying goes. And I'm just as guilty of that as anybody. So nobody take that the wrong way, please. Nobody takes that the wrong way at all. But if you want to look them up on Twitter, you know, just go ahead and look up at WRKRSS TRIKEBACK Workers Strike Back. That's, I mean, just look it up. If you look up Workers Strike Back on Twitter on the search engine, you'll find it real quick. and they've been around since this past still January. So they just launched their channel here on Twitter a short while ago, and they have 908 followers. So go ahead, give them your support, and at least on Twitter, and then see where it can go from there. I got some bills I got to pay. Right now, it's a little tight for me financially at the end of the month usually, but as soon as things are caught up in the next week or so, I think I'm going to link up with Workers Strike Back. So where to go from here? Let's see here. Okay, so my point is this, folks, and that is that we just need to go and try to find an alternative to what's not been working, and that's what we'll have to do. So anyway, we'll continue with this discussion here, but I will go and interrupt with the chat lines, and then I'll keep going some more. So we are monetized. So, remember about the super chats. And I just want to remind everybody about that for KRTD Media. So, anyway, I see Nikki's over here. Hey, yo. How are you doing, Nikki? Let's see. And we have Snipe Hunter. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, he's saying hi to Nikki. And of course, and saying hi, Willie, and saying hi to everyone. And KRTD saying hi, gang. That's right. Hi, KRTD. Let's see. We have here, hi, gang. I'm saying back to everybody. And of course, let's see here. Yes. Everybody's kind of greeting everybody back here. That was like in the very beginning there. And Catherine Ann McCloskey saying here, I want to call it the Socialist Party of America, but the Socialist Labor Party name is open. Yeah, but the Socialist Labor Party, they're still around, right? I guess they're still around. I know the People's Magazine, the newspaper, the People's, I think it's called The People. They're still in circulation. And the way that they talk about relevant issues from the time of Daniel DeLeon back in the late 1800s and early 1900s is quite entertaining. So apparently he had an answer for everything that was going to happen today in the year 2023. Honestly, if you pick up The People, you'll know what I'm talking about. So there you have it, folks. And I got more to say about this, but we need a new movement, and they're refreshing, and because honestly, I'm telling you, when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to the squad, I don't want to be mean, but they are not doing what they're supposed to do, and we have so much hope in them, and and they do nothing. Other than just do a lot of virtue signaling, and that's honestly very unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. Because I don't want to sound like I'm just. In fact, I don't want to sound like I'm beating up on them all the time, because that just gets beside the point. But we need to do something different, is what I'm saying, and it's just not working right now. What's been going on? So it's just a matter of trying to stay focused, and I think that this movement here will be most helpful in that regard. So just as I normally do, I we'll put a little bit of I would say I like to put a little bit of a spin from other people and share their takes, whereby I can go ahead and essentially put my
Recordings just got better.
Oh gosh, put my 2 cents in there. So that's basically what I'm planning to do here. So if you give me a moment, we'll get everything set up at this point. Give me a moment. Okay. Let's see here. We'll go ahead and set. Well, that's not quite what I'm trying to do. So let me do this. Okay. All right. And let me set everything up here. When you're your own producer, you know what I'm saying? Okay. So this is going to be from the program Due Dissidence, and they were discussing what I've been discussing, and I'll go ahead and give you my take on their take on everybody's take on in just a short moment. So hold on a moment here, and we will get everything set. Okay. All right, and here we go. And what I'm going to do is put a little bit of speed to it for the sake of time. All right, and there we go.
Councilwoman and Socialist Alternative member Ksahama Sawant announced this week that she will not be seeking re-election to the city council. Instead, she's founding a new labor organization called Workers Strike Back. In a guest article for The Stranger, a Seattle-based newspaper, she articulated the need for an independent workers' movement. I'm going to read a brief section of that right now. We're not going to read the whole thing, obviously, but she says, "We cannot put our faith in the AOCs or the Pramila Jayapals, even though I understand there were many who had high expectations for them. AOC recently claimed that she could not fight against Democratic leaders on behalf of workers because it would cause relational harm." That was the video that we caught.
And this is why I think that Workers Strike Back is kind of hinting of maybe urging people to support some kind of a Labor Party. And that's just an indicator right there of that. And especially with how lazy the Democratic Party leadership can be.
However, and I knew that relational and reputational harm was going to be bad for her.
Yes.
What about the vast and very real harm taking place in the absence of such a fight for our needs? Meanwhile, the organization that should be holding AOC and the squad accountable, the DSA, appears to be unwilling to do so. It gives me no pleasure to say this because I am currently a member of DSA, but the DSA leadership has, for the most part, provided cover for the misleadership of the squad.
They have, and with the rail strike vote that they voted for to basically order these people to go back to work, that would have been enough if I would have still been a member of DSA for me to resign from DSA. And I say this there's a lot of people that will say what I'm saying here. There's a lot of good people in DSA. This is not an attack on them, but the leadership. And I've been a member of DSA over the years and on and off. And let's just say that DSA is going to have to really impress me at this point for me to ever consider rejoining. So anyway, let's continue.
There is a vacuum of real left leadership locally and nationally. We need a new party for the working people, one that holds elected officials accountable, that bases itself on social movements, that organizes alongside workers on the streets and in workplaces. And I think all of that is exactly right. I want to share one more exhibit here from workersstrikeback.org. There are 5 demands as a movement here. 1, workers need a real raise. 2, good union jobs for all. 3, fight racism, sexism, and all oppression. Quality, affordable housing, and free healthcare for all. No more sellouts. We need a new party. She calls out AOC and the squad in that article and mentions that, look, Socialist Alternative has picked some fights with the DSA, and there's a lot of crossover between them. It's not one or the other. Ksahama is a member of both. And I think, look, she's exactly right. Somebody has to lead a charge here. And I understand people have mixed reactions to this because it sucks certainly for the people of Seattle to lose someone like that who has delivered many, many wins for that city. She won $15 an hour in Seattle before the Sanders campaign, when that became thought of as a national fight. Right. Like $15 an hour was not even a pipe dream at that point. I mean, when Sanders introduced it in 2015, that's when everybody said this is a pipe dream, this is unrealistic. It wasn't even that at that point. It was nothing. And she won it pretty fast after winning that seat. And, all sorts of things from the Amazon tax to renters' rights. She is a great fighter and a great champion for her people in Seattle. And so it's going to suck for them to lose her. But at the same time, she has enough star power, and she probably feels a need to take this more national, because as effective as she's been on the Seattle City Council, she's on the Seattle City Council. And if there was a broader movement of socialist organizers who really had the kind of fighting spirit that she had, she wouldn't feel a need to do this. She would have felt herself as one of many who are, carrying this torch. But as she says in this article, there aren't many. There aren't many. You look around, and even organizations like DSA have been co-opted to a large extent. And so,
and it's so sad because DSA was the real deal at one point. And there was a time when DSA, it meant something. It means nothing now in this day and age. And same with some other organizations that sported the red lefty banner that orbits around the Democratic Party today too. They're not without blame either. But DSA, being the biggest kid on the block, is the reason they're kind of being focused on right now. So anyway,
so that's why she's doing this. I don't blame her. Go ahead.
I think she's right, and I think what we really need is we're going to be getting into the Cop City thing in Atlanta. What really strikes me about, for example, the George Floyd movement and many other actions, the CHOP zone, they're very leaderless. They're very directionless. Where there are leaders, very often they're poor leaders, or they're just scamming people, as turned out to be the case with the Black Lives Matter national leadership. There is all of this energy that is being put to no good purpose. And we do have a lack of credible voices and movement leaders that can really unite this fractious left. There is a willingness, and she identifies that in her article. There's more of a willingness of people to really put themselves on the line and fight the establishment and fight the system that you haven't seen since the Vietnam era. However, unlike in that era, it's scattered all over the place. There's really no focus. There's really no direction. The left didn't just start having the problem of internecine fighting. That's always characterized the left. But I think it's being exacerbated by the lack of a unifying agenda and focus to all of this energy. Everybody knows that the country is a shit show, but nobody seems to have a clear policy goal for fixing it. And she is articulating a clear policy goal. But I don't have to tell you, because it's a lot of what this show is about. And actually, this is not really new. We're just facing a new version of this. The identitarian left and the economic left being at odds with each other, that's an old story. It's just playing out in a more exaggerated form in some respects. In a way, actually, it's kind of inverted, because if you look at the fights that went on between those wings in the 60s, the economic leftists were a lot further than they are now. Whereas today, it's the opposite. The identitarians are much more radical than the identitarians were then. The identitarians then were just about desegregation and whether that should be really the focus.
Interesting take. And I want to share what somebody said about teacher unions that kind of fit into that range, because in the South, organizing the American Federation of Teachers was heavily discouraged due to their commitment to civil rights, at the time. So back then, just like the Democratic Party in the South, the NEA was like the place to go for union organizing if you weren't in all lockstep behind integration. So they were called the Jim Crow unions by nickname, referring to the National Education Association. Somehow along the way, the American Federation of Teachers, which I will argue is a better union then and now, remained the same, whereas the NEA went from staunch segregationism to going way overboard in extreme political correctness and what is toxic about liberalism on the left today. And whereas the American Federation of Teachers had kind of remained on a steady course, their economic justice kind of coincided with their racial justice, and it was more focused, and it had a good balance of what they needed to be done to make our society better. And I think that the AFT has gotten the short end of this when it comes to organizing teachers, in particular in the South. I know in the 1990s there were attempts for the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association to merge, and I personally wish they would have merged back then. But I know somebody who is with the AFT. I'm sorry, who was with the AFT that is glad that the merger did not transpire. So there is also that. So anyway, suffice to say that that was just an example of what that was being discussed there. So we'll let Keaton and Russell continue.
Civil rights should be the focus. Whereas the economic left back then, they were straight up Marxist-Leninists, right? So today we're more, perhaps Ms. Sawant accepted, we're more just European-style socialism, right? I mean, most of us are just kind of fighting for that. But hey, Sawant will run into that. Like, it is a problem. Like, if we do try to unite this fractious left, how are you going to do it? I saw that at Grand Central. We talked about that. You had the older organizers wanted to keep it on economics, wanted to keep it on class. As soon as they got a younger teachers union rep, it went to identity, and they shut it down right away.
Well, that's where some of the political party ambitions of this movement are a little bit less encouraging than the just straight up militant labor moves that they're talking about making, which we're going to get into in a second. But our Patreon caller, Ellen, turned her mic on. So do you want to chime in on this for a minute?
Yeah, I was just wondering, in terms of a tactic, what y'all think about her including the language of we have to stop racism, sexism, and all forms of oppression, because we get back to that identitarian bit, which tends, over the long haul, it seems to me, to overwhelm everything else you've already said. A. B. You've got this sort of loosey-goosey language. What does that mean? What do we mean, fight racism and sexism? Whereas in her other points, it was very concrete.
Well, I think that's a good point. And that relates to
real quick, that's Ellen Jemerson. She is a Baptist minister down in Alabama. She is her church is the first church in Alabama, first Baptist church to perform a same-sex marriage in the state of Alabama. Just thought I let everybody know that. So it's just so yeah, she's kind of an interesting person. I'll recommend looking her up on Twitter. Recommend looking her up. She's an interesting individual. So just saying.
So what we're going to get into next, because I think that is aimed more at the political party component, because you have to build coalitions to form a party. And a lot of the identity politics is good for bringing certain people into your movement. Now, those people can end up sabotaging it in the long run, which is the danger. right? And I'm not suggesting that she's doing it for cynical purposes. I don't believe she is. I mean,
Right.
she held BLM vigils in City Hall when it was closed
Right.
during lockdowns.
Yeah.
So I think she very deeply cares about these issues. I'm not saying that she's being shallow or she's being
Right.
opportunistic, but I do share your concern that once you open that door,
Right.
you don't know what kind of elements are going to flood in. And how they're going to cause divisions in the ranks, which is why a lot of class organizing and labor organizing makes a point to sort of not necessarily shun that kind of stuff, but not to center it, as Russell was talking about when he filmed the railroad worker rally.
Well, I think another thing people should be careful about is that there is still an FBI that likes to disrupt populist movements around the country, no matter what side of the ideological fence they're on. And I just thought I'd throw that tidbit in there. But anyway,
Midtown Manhattan.
And you know what? I mean, that would be my answer. It's not that as leftists, we do care about things like we just aired your documentary
Right.
that was all about the plight of migrants. It's not that we don't care about these things.
Right.
We are deeply suspicious of what we believe is a corporatized identity politics that is simply used to divide the working class, and the language of it and the tactics of it are so divisive that it, on the one hand, gets a lot of support from clickbait-seeking corporate media because they thrive on conflict, social media companies that elevate those conflicts, and deeply troubled narcissists for whom that language of attack, of hatred, of division deeply appeals. And even people who are simply looking for a way to channel their idealism, if they weren't disturbed narcissists before they got involved in those movements, they're
Right,
going to be
right.
by the time they come out the other side.
Right.
and yeah, that's you want to talk about that. We have seen that happen on the left over the years too. Usually the weaponization of identity politics have kind of done some harm to the left, and it's usually done against people on the left. And they have done it to Bernie Sanders. They have done it to Breonna Joy Gray, and they will do it to anyone that's actually at the moment seemingly are trying to speak truth to power. So there is that. And so anyway, as I said, I saw that the other day, and I just thought it was kind of relevant to the discussion. So I figured, let the folks from the Due Dissidents, let there be a discussion about their take on it. So anyway, getting back to what I need to say, there's a lot that's going on in this country right now, and in my years of living, I have not. I mean, I'm seeing the what looks like could be a return of this movement, this labor movement, of something that's akin to the 1930s, and if it's not done right, we could lose an opportunity for not just a generation but multiple generations. I'm fearful that we lost an opportunity with rejecting forced to vote 2 years ago. I do have that concern. So and that's what's happened right now. It's like whenever there's an opportunity, it gets missed, and then we're all worse off as a result. And there are people that prefer to see things this way. But what's so sad is that even with people being more aware now than they were then, I think that there are people today that are even resentful that some things have been discussed, even to the level that's being discussed, and they would love to see the United States go back to the days of Bill Clinton and George Herbert Walker Bush, where this sort of thing is just swept under the rug, and any sort of left opposition is neutered, and that's, I think that's what they would prefer, in my view. So you compare the United States, for example.
Oh, don't judge me, Anton.
You compare the United States, for example, to another country, and I mean, what's been going on, like in France, for example. The Macron government, I think that the retirement age is 62, the way it used to be in the United States before Ronald Reagan and company and Democrats got together, and the Republicans and the Democrats got together and raced it to 67. And so what's happened in this country is that right now, in France, they're trying to raise it up to 64. Not even what they've done in the United States, raising it up to 67. And the difference between France and the United States is that they don't put up with no crap over there. God bless them, they don't. And so let me go ahead and if I can go ahead and get everything set up here, show you an example of how things are faring over there in France over the going after a basic service like retirement. Now, I want to make that understood. I'm not urging anything of that type of behavior, as far as what you saw there with the. What I'm saying is that the French don't put up with any crap, and Americans sit there and they take it. And because there's psychology in France is that the government are always scared of the people. Whereas here in America, the people are scared of the government, and and that's and there's just something wrong. There's just something wrong with that picture here, in that regard, regarding that situation. And again, I want to keep things peaceful and all of that. But the point I'm trying to make is, all this austerity that keeps getting worse. When you bust the unions the way it has been busted from the days of Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton with his NAFTA nonsense, and continue under George W. Bush and Barack Obama, who promised hope and change, was a neoliberal, and Donald Trump, who pretended to be a populist, gave us more Reaganomics and more establishment crap, and then Joe Biden, who kept his promise about no fundamental changes being made. At least with Joe Biden, he kept his promise. There'll be no fundamental changes. And there were no fundamental changes. No minimum wage increase, no public option. Even though we should really go with Medicare for all, and screw that, we should go with National Health Service. There's the little piddly student debt relief that he supposedly tried to have enacted. Got stalled. There's no the Build Back Better was put on hold. Everything's working out great for those in charge, and all of us. Oh, what do we have? We have pointless culture war narratives. People blaming each other, and that's what it comes down to, and nothing that unites us, and nothing could unite us more than what we have in common. And we're being had. I mean, we're being had. I mean, I'll give you my example of personal experience. I'm going to be 54 years old, and in a few months, well, in a little over a month, I'm going to be 54 years old, and I don't consider myself a poor man by any stretch of the imagination, but but I look at myself and compare to what my father and mother, how things went along for them and everything. It's this way for each generation, and the millennials have it a little bit worse. That with housing and healthcare and all this sort of thing that just keeps the cost of living that keeps going up. It is kind of hard for people to make it. So it's like, and then you have a country where it's like anytime there was opportunity to pass has been ripped away, and it's been ripped away at every turn. And so, and I have said this to a fairly well-known online leftist revolutionary, who I won't mention the name here in passing conversation, that when it comes to this country, it's hard to love a nation who doesn't love its people back, and that is sometimes how I feel, and so it's like there are people who are in Washington who don't really care about us. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but they really, really don't care about us. And so we need to stop kind of hoping that somebody's going to come along to save us. We have to look to ourselves and save ourselves and work together. We got to stop looking to the politicians, and we need to create our own institutions, our own little infrastructures, our own communities, our own ways of trying to go and make things matter for people. A good example of this is I have a friend who's a transgender friend who gets free drugs from an LGBTQ clinic. And that's a great way of trying to make a difference with medical inflation being the way it is, to try to supply medication to help the community. In her case, the medication for her transitioning, and that's a situation right there where people working together, trying to do what our horrible politicians refuses to do. So, in other words, sometimes you got to take it upon yourself to do these things, and there are some things you as an individual can do by yourself and everything, and there are things that it takes a community or it takes a collective to take care of for a whole. And I don't think that one is necessarily exclusive from the other. And I don't even take an absolute one or the other, but I lean more toward a communitarian sort of solution toward most of our economic problems. When you hear people talk about co-ops, for example, just give an example of the Mondragon Corporation that's in the Basque region of Spain, for example. It was, I believe it was in the 1940s. It was a anti-poverty Catholic priest that helped create the Mondragon Corporation that creates a lot of the food products that you will see in not just Spain, but much of Latin America today. It is a multinational corporation that is worker-owned, for example. Or it was years ago. I don't know I'm going to assume it's still in the worker-owned category, because I know when I read up on it about back in the 90s, it was worker-owned. So, and the point I'm trying to make is that when you work as a collective and you share the profits, it's a way of looking out for one another. So, I'm not like dogmatic on how we can go about this sort of thing. It could be done through that measure, like what the parish priests did in the Basque region of Spain in the 1940s. It could be done through the example I mentioned with the transgender activists in another state that goes to a clinic and the LGBTQ community and the medical people in that community helping to create a network so people can get the medication they need due to medical inflation, to do something about it, that sort of thing. There are other areas where working as a collective can create good things for the people. The public corporations that were established after World War II in Great Britain. Public corporations were the nationalized industries by Clement Attlee's Labor government. These entities were, whether we were talking about coal mines or we were talking about gas companies or some of the trains, long distance truckings, airlines, you name it, that was owned by the British government. It was nationalized. The people who worked there were essentially civil servants, but they were called public corporations. I think in Canada, in a very, very smaller level, they're called crown corporations. But the point I'm trying to make is that's an example, and we're talking about in Britain. That's more of a governmental structure directed from the House of Commons and in a friendly administration down on 10 Downing Street, depending on the government and everything. So that's an example of, we're talking about nationalization of industries. And here in this country, I would say on the national level that healthcare, certain things like healthcare needs to be nationalized, not just getting rid of the private health insurance company, but getting rid of the private health insurance companies, putting the doctors and nurses on a direct salary by the federal and state government together, having it so where Big Pharma used the Defense Production Act of 1950 to nationalize Big Pharma. So you can go and manufacture pharmaceuticals to make cheap for the American people, American population. Some people say, well, no, get rid of innovation here in the United States. Somebody from another country will come up with the innovation. I don't care if that's what's going to happen. I'm more concerned with people getting treated right now where they need the medication, they need the prescriptions, and they need it at zero or as close to zero in terms of a price as possible. We're talking about, taking Amtrak converting that into a bullet train, high speed rails, that sort of thing. I mean, just think of the jobs you can create doing this sort of thing. And there's endless possibilities. And things you could do on the local level. I mean, I know that that there were years ago when gas prices were tremendously higher than they are now in some ways, that some towns created a public gas station to compete against the other gas stations, which had high gouging prices. And they were, and these other places were angry that this public gas station that sold gas at a certain rate forced the other gas stations, and I think it was in Kentucky that they were doing this. It forced the gas prices to drop. Not that I believe in Obamacare, but if Obamacare, I could have reluctantly been for it a decade ago if they would have done a public option, because the public option would have forced the insurance company to drop on their premiums. It would have been a foregone conclusion, So that's an example right there. When, like, for example, a local community creating a community gas station as a way to try to lower gas prices, something of that nature. And, just a willingness to do it. And I'm not saying I have the willingness to do this, but, if you talk to somebody and somebody talks to somebody and somebody else talks to somebody and there's a commitment, you can make this happen. Habitat for Humanity is sort of a gesture. I mean, there was one thing I would say about Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter may not have been the greatest president we ever had, but he sure as heck fire was the greatest ex-president we ever had, without a question, without a doubt. And I don't even think he's a socialist, but he took that idea of building houses for the poor and homeless. I mean, he took that to heart, and he's done some positive things, that there would be more people like Jimmy Carter instead of people like Ronald Reagan chopping wood in a ranch when he was alive, or George W. Bush being stupid all the time when he's not, killing dead Iraqis, killing Iraqis back then in the day, or torturing Afghanistani people who were turned over to the U.S. by the Taliban, that sort of thing. Jimmy Carter turns out to be better than these people. People like Bill Clinton, who goes around, just getting rid of Glass-Steagall, to bring us the housing bubble. I'm not partisan. I when it comes to these politicians in DC, I pretty much hate them all these days. And because look what they have done to us as a society. I mean, just driving around, you could just see the poverty around, and it's just, and I don't want to be grim. I don't want to be grim, and I don't want to be, a Debbie Downer, but that's what you see. And so, again, what she's done, referring to Ksahama Sawant, what she's done is basically, what really needs to be as a model right now to do, because I think that worker strike back could kind of lead to some of these other things. So we, just a little bit of food for thought and all of that. So and all. So anyway, and let's see what we have here on the chat line. And I've already talked on the chat line with a few people here. I don't know if I said something about this. Oh, yeah, we did talk about the Socialist Party versus the Socialist Labor Party. The SLP and the People went tits up in 2011. I did not know that, Catherine. I did not know that. I thought they were still around. That's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, well then that's a good name to choose then. Hey Willie, sup chat fam. Hey Warren, how are you doing? Looking forward to the secret show. I'm glad you're feeling better. Glad you're feeling better, and glad that Jimmy's feeling better. I know she wasn't feeling too well last week either. So anyway, we'll continue with this discussion. So anyway, that's what I wanted to kind of touch on this evening with Workers Strike Back. So and all that kind of tied in with Workers Strike Back. And as I said, pay my bills, which I got to do because life is tight for me right now at the end of the month, always, as usual. And then when that happens, then that'll be my thing. I'm not going to be partisan to you guys about it and say you got to join on any of these streams here on KRTD, nor any of my private streams. But I do want to kind of give them a thumbs up and kind of acknowledge that I'm liking and what they're doing, and I'm impressed by what I've seen so far in terms of what they have done and all of that. So let's see here. Let's see, what do we got? So anyway, I just hope that I just want to remind everybody that we're monetized now, and so we have chat lines. So feel free to I'm not like twisting your arm, anything like that, but just to let y'all know, and also anyway, and also anti-war movement, and I'm going to discuss that here. And I noticed that Ksahama Sawant is a good faith actor or actress, but I'm saying actor in a gender neutral term. Good faith actor in terms of the foreign policy. So I'm going to make the assumption that and if I am wrong, Workers Strike Back and Ksahama Sawant can correct me, and I will retract what I say, but I think that as far as the Washington, D.C. on February 19th is also an example where people can do their part, because we're also talking about humanity here. And I do know that they're anti-war. That is the group, Workers Strike Back and Socialist Alternative. They are anti-war, so I know that they don't support the military-industrial complex, obviously. So what I want to discuss with this march, as I said, when I was at the anti-war march in Washington, D.C. back in 2002, that's where I met some members of Socialist Alternative. So anyway, let's see. Hopefully my screen won't bounce when I go and try scrolling. So this is from the Rage Against War Machine website, but I think it kind of relates to what we're discussing here. About not wanting one more penny for war in the Ukraine. This is something that we can kind of link things to, and the negotiating for a peace and negotiate and stopping the war inflation, the military industrial complex, the defense contractors, that sort of thing. And to negotiate for peace, as I said, it's very important to do this sort of thing. Because our domestic movement for economic justice is kind of forgotten when there's war too, to disband NATO. There's no need to have a NATO. There was never a need to have a NATO in the first place, to put a stop to global nuclear war, because we're talking about humanity. And then we need to slash the military budget, the Pentagon budget, absolutely, to abolish the CIA and to put a major curb on the military-industrial state, to end imperialism, basically, to abolish war and empire, to restore civil liberties and to free Julian Assange, one of my favorite subjects. So and it would be even more of a favorite subject is the day comes when he is free. So there is that. So anyway, these are things I want to talk about. So and I think that everything kind of connects. You know, I don't use the term intersectionality that much, but I guess you can call this a sort of intersectionality of sorts and everything. So anyway, so I'm going to cut this a little short today because I'm kind of tired. Work has been a little hectic this week. It's been a nightmare. When I say nightmare, it's been a nightmare. So I'm going to probably cut it short this week. So right now, I would just like to say to you all to remember to always to support KRTD, to support them on Facebook, support them on Twitter, support them on YouTube, you know, and support all other independent media as well, and you know, support them through super chats and everything. Same with my channel. Subscribe to the Willy Bragg Show. Subscribe to them, my program here on YouTube, on Twitch, Twitter, and on Facebook. And remember to always to encourage each and every one of you to go ahead and form your own platform, because you know we're all at the end of the day muckrakers. And I say this as a First Amendment absolutist, and so that's kind of my jam in that regard. And to always get a second opinion or 22 opinions if possible. And to like here on my channel, like on the channels, KRTD, that helps with the algorithms to help. And to remember to comment and hopefully, you know, I'll comment back whether we agree or not. We'll have a conversation. And to y'all have a great day, a great evening, and I will rest up and chill. My family's visiting, so I'm going to talk to them for a little while, and then come back around midnight for the secret show, and I will talk to each and every one of you all later. So y'all take care. I would have played an intro and an outro, but I had a little trouble getting access to that. So y'all take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.